Welcome to Masters of Trade. I'm really excited about this episode. This is an episode we've been looking forward for a long time, specifically because a lot of our guests in the past have been people that have focused on building e-commerce businesses, SaaS businesses, and right now we're just going for the mother load. Just a word of intro about our guest. I basically came across an article a couple of months ago where I read that somebody right after the Conor McGregor fight commissioned practically overnight a suit. I see Nathan's laughing here. Commissioned overnight a suit with the words "fuck you." I guess we could keep that out afterwards. The words "fuck you" tailored all over it. Overnight, got sued. But it was this incredible story that drove home how easy it is right now with the right tools and the right know-how to source internationally. And I got to the end of the article and I'm like, this is a person that we need to speak to. This is we need to get onto Masters of Trade. So I'm really happy to welcome Nathan Resnick, the CEO of Sourcify. Nathan, welcome to Masters of Trade.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. So we'll jump in a second into exactly what Sourcify does and talk a little bit about Nathan's background, both as an operator. This is like a guy that has built his own businesses, has been in the trenches, discovered things himself, grew up as a manufacturer, importer, retailer, and then created a company to actually help other companies do it as well. And we're gonna hit Nathan up hard to figure out what the lessons were that he learned in order to really scale businesses. Just a quick reminder, the way Master Trade episodes typically go, we'll start off with a couple of general interview questions about Nathan's background. If you don't care about who Nathan is, just fast forward like 5 minutes or so and you can get to the meat of sourcing. But if I were you,
you guys want to know who I am, right?
Everyone does. So first of all, Nathan, you started two companies before you got into Sourcify, right? You started two different companies, right? So in like 30 seconds, just tell us what both of those companies were.
Basically, I mean, my experience really starts on the ground floor in China. In high school, I was a foreign exchange student over there, living with a host family that didn't speak English, attending a local Chinese high school. And that's actually where I started flipping products on eBay and Amazon and realized how fun and exciting that was. I mean, you could literally sell products factory direct to consumers all over the world. And so I always wanted to create my own products. And so the actual first product that I created is where I invented the first leather watch strap without holes. It worked like a zip tie where you slide the strap through the buckle and it caught on notches in the strap. So that grew to a 6-figure Shopify store in the first year. This was when I was not even 20 years old yet, and just realized the power of e-commerce. Being able to have a 75%, 80% plus gross margin was mind-blowing to me. And now, we help hundreds of companies do that every day at Sourcify. It's incredible to see how, streamlined you can make the process of bringing a product to life become. It's not that hard to actually start your own company right now. And so I started for myself as an e-commerce entrepreneur, selling products through Shopify and Amazon and eBay, and realized, what excited me was actually the manufacturing and supply chain side of the business.
So yeah, it's rare to come across somebody who utters the words, "What excited me was the supply chain and manufacturing side of the business." But the truth is, like, we keep on coming across that. Like the CEO of Apple, the CEO of Old Navy, the CEO of Lego, those are all supply chain guys, right? That's like
right.
that is the thing, and I think it's really cool. Can you tell me, like, what happened in your head when you're like?
Yeah, so let me tell you the story, because people are always wondering, like, how is that exciting? I'm like, think about it yourself. Like, you have this idea in your head and you want to turn it into a product so badly, but you don't know how. And that was me, maybe 6-7 years ago. And the first product that I manufactured myself, that first leather watch strap prototype that we invented, it was like, came to my doorstep while I was in class in college. I literally told the teacher, I'm going to the bathroom, drove home, saw the package, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, is this actually the product? And I opened it up and it was just mind blowing. It was like, I was in shock to see something that had been in my head, a month, 2 months prior, that was now on my wrist that I could wear and show all my friends and, really start selling to other people. That whole process, I remember that moment, and it was just so exciting to me that it's the power right now of entrepreneurship and e-commerce and growing, a company, that you get to create so many cool products. And so I started with those watch straps. We started doing sunglasses, hats, backpacks. My next company was Cork Supply Co. I had a buddy here in San Diego who I actually used to live in China with, who was creating these cool wooden and stainless steel watches. And I saw the trend in those sustainable materials. I was like, oh, well, I like cork. I like drinking wine. Maybe I can do something with these wine corks. And so we created a brand called Cork Supply Co., where we took high quality recycled cork from Portugal, where about 80% of the world's cork is manufactured, sent that material that was basically scrapped after production of these wine corks, sent them to our factories in China and said, hey, we want to create hats with cork brims, we want to create watches with cork straps, and created a line of cork oriented products. And so look around you, see what products are exciting to you, and really find out how you can create something that is innovative, that's exciting, and go through that process, because I guarantee you, you're not going to want to stop.
Yeah, one thing that actually kind of strikes me from both of the companies that you started, they kind of both had a certain nexus in China, right? Like you're like a friend that you meet in China, or like you're actually out there. And I think that it seems to me that a lot of people, like, you look at a finished product and it just seems so foreign to you. Like that whole process of actually creating that just seems like such a quagmire. Do you feel like being out in China and realizing where this stuff is coming from, like, did that impact your the feeling that, oh, I could do this? Like, of course I could do it. Why couldn't I do that?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it impacts me in two ways. Number one is I walk into a retail store, I just see what anyone's wearing or using, and I know how much it actually costs to produce that product. And so for me to go into any retail store like Nordstrom's or Bloomingdale's and buy a product at retail prices, it's like I'm scared to do it, because I know how much money these retailers and these brands, margin wise, are making. Like, if you go into a retail store and buy a shirt for $30, their gross margin is going to be over 85, almost 90% on that. I mean, there's obviously logistics costs and import tax and all of that, but the gross margin is so high. I'm trying to buy all my clothes, and products factory direct. But the other side too is, I've been to hundreds of factories across the world now, and I will say there are some factories that the conditions just aren't there. They aren't what you want them to be. They aren't clean. They don't treat their workers well. And those factories we stay away from, but you wouldn't know if you didn't go there. And so there's some, I don't want to name any names here, but there are some products that I've seen in production that make you not necessarily want to go out and buy those products at a retail store. But at the end of the day, that's that company's business, and they have to keep their costs down. But I think it's something just to keep in mind, especially as you start your own e-commerce store, is you want to take a sustainable source. What kind of approach do you want to have to manufacturing? Because everyone wants to produce products for a cheaper cost, at a higher quality, and at a lower lead time. And those three main points: price, quality, lead time. You can't have all three. They can't be the best of all worlds. Basically, you really have to focus on maybe a certain tier. Like if you want a really high quality product, well, you're probably gonna have to pay a little more in production. If you want to produce faster than everyone else, maybe the quality is going to have some fade over time. So it's kind of those dynamics that you have to analyze to see, what's going to be the core of my brand, and like, what am I going to grow around? Am I going to have the best unit margin so I can have a very, lenient kind of cost per acquisition when I start? You've got to analyze those three dynamics, and it's so fascinating to see how e-commerce companies, grow, like Movement Watches, like Gymshark, these $100 million+ companies that started 5, 6, 7 years ago. They've grown so fast because they focused on their brand, and I think a lot of times that margin, they focused on what makes them special.
Yeah, that's cool that you mentioned the brand. We just spoke to Chad Rubin from Scubana on Masters of Trade last week, and one of the big takeaways there is, right, is that the brand, you don't control your Amazon store, right? You don't control your assets there, but the one thing that you can control anywhere you sell is your brand, and that sticks with you. And I guess, I mean, trying to figure out, based on the three components that you talked about, like the little variables, the levers that you can change. Good planning probably, right? Good planning means that you can afford a longer lead time, and that lets you take a little bit more affordance with like quality and price. So like, how do you plan things right? Like, what's the right way to really plan out your next product, right? What are the big things to look out for?
I mean, so when we produce products, we do some products internally here at Sourcify too, and we look at three main components. Number one would be interest. Like, are we as a team actually going to be excited by producing these products? And simple kind of example is, you see some men launching cosmetics companies, or like lip gloss companies, stuff like that. I'm like, look, like, maybe Kylie Cosmetics is crushing it with her cosmetics line, but that doesn't mean John's Cosmetics company is gonna crush it as well. And so I think
Are
some
you saying you don't like my stubble glitter? I thought that was a huge win.
yeah, no, I love it. I love it. But I'm just saying, ask yourself, is this a product that I would buy myself? You know, if you're into the outdoors, maybe you do some hiking equipment or gear like that. But, you know, if you aren't interested in buying that product yourself, it's going to be very hard for you to be excited to sell that product. Number two, what I would say is margin. You know, you always got to analyze the margin, especially selling into Amazon. You know, you can see your competitors' pricing, what they're selling at, or on Shopify, you can see, you know, their pricing to see how much these products are being sold for. And if you know your unit costs are too high and you can't meet that price and you can't have a sustainable margin that makes you money, it's not going to make sense to start selling that product, because, you know, there are some products out there where you aren't going to be able to get that lower unit cost until you produce that volume. And if you're a, you know, young company or a first-time entrepreneur, you might not have the money to actually invest in the inventory at that volume. The other kind of question that we always ask is the complexity of the product. And this means, you know, there's some products out there that you need an injection mold, you need, you know, to invest actually a lot of money into the product before you start production. And some of these molds cost, you know, 10, 20, $30,000 depending on the complexity. And so if you haven't put down that much cash before you even get, you know, a finished production run, that's a pretty big upfront investment for a young company. And so kind of the dynamic there that we look at is say, hey, you know, can we take an existing product on the market and improve upon it? And one of the best ways, this is kind of a hack that we use internally, is look at the negative reviews. You know, you can look at the negative reviews on Amazon, on, you know, different review websites, and see, hey, you know, what are people saying about this product that I think I can improve on? And so take those reviews, apply it to that existing product, and create a better product. You know, that's a simple way to get started and actually improve upon an existing product, and not having to go down a very complex and confusing route of you know, investing a lot into a actual mold or something like that.
Right. Do you feel like sometimes, you know, my guess is that if you're dropping 30K on a mold, that creates a nice defensible moat, right? That buys you a little bit of time before your competitors catch up.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the benefit of that can be defensibility, but at the end of the day, it also comes down to the trust of the factory, because what's going to stop that factory from using your mold for other users or for other buyers? And so you have to make sure in your contract or your agreement with that factory that you own that mold. And so that's one of the kind of missteps that we see some companies taking, where they purchase the mold, the factory owns the mold. Well, you just put down $30,000 for a mold that you don't own. You can produce as many products through the mold as you want, but, you know, so can anyone else now. So make sure in your contracts you have with these factories or POs that you're specific and say, I own this mold. And, you know, there's even some companies that go out, buy molds overseas, ship them back to a facility here in America or wherever they're based, and then produce products locally through that mold.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So I guess one going back for a second to Yes Man and the core company, looking back, right now that you're seeing thousands and thousands of products and how it's sourced, what is something that makes you look back and just say, like, I was a moron? How could I have done that when it came to like
Yeah,
sourcing and
so
manufacturing?
yeah. So one of, I think, the biggest kind of missteps that makes production run slow is not actually knowing your product. And people think like, oh, I can just produce a shirt, like I want this shirt. Well, there's so many different sizes and specifications that go into apparel manufacturing. And this is for any product, for watches, hats, there's all sorts of fabric. For example, like this jacket, like the sleeve opening here on my shoulder on this jacket is different than the sleeve opening on my wrist. And so that's something that you have to consider, and you have to know that measurement. It can be as simple as taking out a ruler and saying, all right, you know, this measurement is 4 inches, this one's, you know, 3 inches, and sending those specifications over to the factory. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of back and forth between buyers and factory reps, because these buyers don't necessarily know the specifications of the product that they want. Like a zipper, there's, you know, 1,000 different zipper options out there. Well, which one do you want? And one of the best ways to actually go through that process is by looking at thousands of different jackets or zippers, basically, and saying, oh, I like this zipper, let's get this one. And you can literally just screenshot that part of an image and say, hey, this is the zipper I want, and they'll probably be able to get you that zipper. And so for me, one of my biggest missteps producing watches for the first time, you know, 6-7 years ago, was that I wasn't even aware that they had, I mean, when I was starting to produce watches, I didn't even know there was automatic and, you know, quartz movement watches. I didn't know from right in the watch world. You know, now I can tell all sorts of different components in the watch. But the whole dynamic there is I didn't know the actual process and components that go into these products to bring them to life. And you'll be fortunate enough if you're working with a good factory where your factory, sales reps that you're talking to from the factory, they know everything about the product. They've hopefully produced millions of units of this product. So they'll be asking you the right questions to ensure they get your specifications right. And if they aren't asking you questions about your product, you probably aren't working with a good factory, because the bad ones will just say yes, 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 and you'll produce a sample and it won't be anything of what you expected, because that factory didn't confirm those specifications before they produced that sample. So if a factory is asking questions about your product, it's a good thing.
Do you need to get out there yourself? Like I speak to a bunch of guys that are doing this, like go out to China, feet on the ground. Do you need that to really get the product?
It probably depends on your scalability of production. Like, if you're working through Sourcify, we handle that for you. If you're working through big trading companies, they'll have people on the ground there too. But I would say, for me specifically, I started out on the ground floor in China. I was there in high school. I had that experience. Have a bunch of friends across the country there now. And so I would say if you utilize, a platform like Sourcify, you don't have to go over there. I will say as you grow, it is cool to go over there. And I think everyone that does business in Asia knows that it's fueled by relationships. So if you can go over there and make that face-to-face relationship, the factory is probably going to start treating you better than some of the other buyers. And when, lead times are going to be important for your company, it can make sense to buy a ticket over there and go over there. If you guys are in Guangzhou, definitely stop by our office there. It's we're always happy to have people in. And so it's just kind of a dynamic of when you start out, maybe it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't necessarily make sense all the time as you grow. But if you are really looking to cut costs or having struggles with negotiations or lead times, it can make sense to go over there. But I will say, I think people are always surprised how not only just culturally different China is, but a lot of people there don't speak English well. Even though they study it through high school, their English ability isn't there. So I would highly recommend going with someone that speaks the language, or going and having fun. It's an amazing country, and the growth there, the growth of the country has been incredible.
And do you think, I mean, we're talking a lot about China. Do you feel like China is where it's at for the next 10 years, or if you're starting a product from scratch right now?
Here's the scary thing for every e-commerce company and retailer in China is that, for example, if you're having your factory help do some of the sorting to sell on, Amazon, some of the FBA prep, then that factory is understanding how to actually sell on Amazon directly. And so literally, I mean, every factory we talk to asks, hey, can we start selling directly to consumers in America? Because they see the margin that they're making compared to the margin that you're making as an e-commerce company, and they're blown away by what these American consumers are willing to pay for these products. And so there's a huge trend towards factories selling direct through marketplaces like Amazon. That will continue to be a trend. But what's going to set you apart is going to be your designs and your brand. You've got to establish that brand equity, and especially on marketplaces like Amazon or even platforms like Shopify, where your brand is what's going to enable you to charge a premium, and it's going to be what enables you to actually protect your product, because a lot of these products that you're selling, it's not going to be worth getting a patent for, and a lot of times you can't even get a patent for. So what sets you apart is your brand, and brands can be protected through trademarks. Design patents could be an option as well. But at the end of the day, brand equity is what's going to get you to become a 7, 8, 9-figure company. It's not going to be, oh, this is a special product. Look at like those. I'll give you an example. Those fidget spinners. I knew the guys that literally were some of the first importers of those spinners. The first few months, they were doing $350,000 a month, and all of a sudden the market got flooded. They went from doing mid 6 figures to low 5 figures in literally a matter of a month, because they couldn't compete on price and the market was flooded. They had developed a bit of a brand and a sales channel, but at the end of the day, when the market's being flooded by products that aren't protected, you aren't going to be able to sustain yourself. And so it's something to be aware of, where if you don't really go out there and develop a brand, then it's going to be harder and harder to last longer term. So pretty much, all the 8-figure stores that we deal with through Sourcify have developed, premium brands that they can charge a good price for their products for.
Yeah, I think that's also a great point, because I was just looking at some of the data where there's somewhere in the vicinity back in 2015. So the data was a little dated. There was somewhere in the vicinity of 190,000 small U.S. importers.
Right.
Whereas last year they said somewhere between 200 and 250,000, 200 or 250,000 Chinese sellers started selling on the Amazon Marketplace, which means
Right.
that in 1 year you suddenly have more Chinese sellers on Amazon in the U.S. than U.S. Importers, full stop, which is a crazy
Exactly.
number. So the brand equity and brand defensibility is really interesting. But when it actually comes to sourcing and manufacturing, right? You talked about design and how you could create a little bit of set yourself a little bit apart with design. What kind of components, what kind of ideas would you look at to really set yourself apart with design? Like, how do you
Yeah,
do
that's a
that?
good question. I mean, I would say you have to become creative with the brand that you're developing. It can be either a new twist on design, it can be a new partnership. Like I just saw, Away, that very fast growing suitcase company. They did this partnership and
Mhm.
collaboration with the NBA where their products are literally made on the outside with the same leather that's used in basketballs, and on the inside they use the same fabric that are used in basketball jerseys. So
I
stuff
feel
like
like
that.
that's a recipe for disaster because if I'm a baggage handler and I see a luggage like a suitcase with like basketball material, I'm gonna start chucking that thing everywhere. But okay.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, maybe don't check that bag when you fly. But
Yeah.
I just think stuff like that where you can collaborate with different, influencers or larger companies, I think is going to continue to be a trend. The other thing I'll mention too about China that I kind of, skipped over was that there's a big opportunity now to start selling into China if you develop a brand here in America. I wouldn't make, selling in China your first step into growth. But what I would say is once you've gotten to a 7, 8 figure mark here in America, there's platforms like Tmall in China where you can sell directly to Chinese consumers. One of the fastest growing e-commerce brands, Daniel Wellington, has been crushing it on Tmall with Chinese consumers. And so it's something to consider as well where, Asia is such an untapped market where a lot of people don't understand yet. And, flashback 5, 10 years ago, only the big brands like Nike and Adidas were able to go into Asia because they were creating stores on the ground floor and creating that brand on the ground floor. Whereas now the e-commerce market in China is growing super fast as well. And so if you're able to create brand equity here in America, then a lot of times you can even start selling those products in China as well for the same price and the same margin that you're getting here in America. That's what I would say. I mean, design wise, I think it's a matter of collaboration. I mean, there are some really cool kind of collaborations that I've seen in the sneakerhead hype beast type of world, which I think will continue to be a trend. And it's
Mhm.
crazy to see what people are willing to pay for some of those apparel items like Supreme. They charge so much money for a T-shirt that just says Supreme on it. It's mind
Right.
blowing to me.
Yeah. Well, so and one of the things we were talking about before the call was the dropping bar for entry, right? That you look at somebody how easy it is. You source something with Sourcify, you import it with a company like Freightos, you sell it on Amazon. Have you at Sourcify ever had somebody who came to you with an idea who you said like maybe don't like is there any reason where like you'd say like you're not ready for this, this is like a good idea to embark on?
Right. I mean, that's a great question. I would say it really depends on their interests. Like kind of when I was talking about deciding what product you want to manufacture. Last year, for example, the craziest product that we did that I would have never thought we would have done was hair extensions, like
Hmm.
synthetic hair extensions. It's like it's pretty big in the cosmetics world, and they also have like real hair ones. And we ended up manufacturing that for like 2 different cosmetics companies. And I had never even thought that those products were being manufactured, like hair extensions. I'm a
Right.
guy, it doesn't even cross my mind, but it's a huge market. I mean, it's incredible. And so there's just so much that you can produce overseas and so much opportunity. Like, look at everything that you're wearing and using right now that had to be manufactured somewhere. And that's kind of that whole dynamic that you're seeing now in the world where the ease of bringing a product to life and growing an e-commerce store isn't that hard. You use the tools like Sourcify to manufacture the products, Freightos to bring the products into the US or your warehouse, wherever it may be. And then you can sell through these platforms like Amazon, eBay, or start your own Shopify store. And it doesn't have to be that hard anymore. I think flashback 5, 10 years ago, where you literally used to have to code your own website from scratch to start selling. And now you could get a Shopify started in a few hours right now. It's incredible.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about the your watch arriving on the doorstep when when you're in a dorm, I was thinking like it takes 9 months to get a baby, right? And then that comes and it's like on your door, and you can't really throw it into a drawer. But I'm thinking like the gestation period for a watch, like you bring it to life in 3 months and it's yours. You can do it. It's like what a feeling of gratification.
Yeah, and that's the other thing you see with these retailers too is everyone in the industry right now is trying to cut their lead times. They're realizing that they have to keep up with e-commerce stores. These bigger retailers are, creating better forecasting systems where they know when they need to reorder their products, so their lead times are hopefully less. Because, for a bigger retailer, if they're producing 100,000 units, 200,000 units at a time, that factory is going to even need to have a lead time to get that raw material and to start producing those products. And so you've got to think about that dynamic as well, where a lot of these products like apparel or whatever it may be, you have raw material sources that these factories have to deal with. And I think one of the things actually that I want to touch on that a lot of people don't even understand by these factories is that the factory that you're primarily dealing with is the assembly factory. Like they're putting the pieces together. Like if it's apparel, it's a cut and sew factory. That factory has their own supply chain with fabric mills, with all these different, sources. Like if it's a shoe that you're producing, they have the laces factory. They have all these little different factories that focus on the specific components that you aren't even dealing with. And that factory is, probably been working with the smaller factories that are focusing on the specific components for a while, which is great. But the factory that you're primarily dealing with as a foreign buyer are the assembly factories. And as you grow, as you start, purchasing, 500,000, millions of dollars overseas, you're going to be able and want to actually dive into those specific component factories. Because, if you're looking to cut your costs, maybe you can save 50 cents on your watch strap, where at, maybe a few $1,000, it doesn't matter that much. But at $100,000, 50 cents goes a long way. And so it's something to consider as you grow, is saying, hey, where is actually each part and component of my product manufactured? And that's something that people don't even realize, that are purchasing over millions of dollars overseas, and they're just still dealing with the assembly factory, which is fine when you're starting with. But as you grow, dive deeper in your supply chain and say, oh wow, well I can cut a few cents here, a few dollars here, and dive into those components.
Yeah, and I like to recommend people. NPR Planet Money had a fantastic series where I'm sure you've seen it. Where like listen to it, where they source an entire T-shirt from scratch, and that provides some great perspective into it. So another thing we were talking about before the call, when it comes to Sourcify, I think that you've kind of talked about three main components, right, of what it is that you guys really help people do. And I think this is also a really good segue into what it is that Sourcify does, right? So why don't you kind of walk us through?
So my background. Totally. Yeah. So my background is direct in e-commerce and in China. And I realized the current options out there to bring a product to life, to be frank, suck. It's so hard to bring a product to life a lot of times. If you go on these open marketplaces, a lot of people don't realize that 70+% of those companies are actually trading companies or wholesalers or agents and working with feeder factories. So we go down and work with actual factories. We pre-vet every factory we work with. Really our process first starts with sorting the specifications with the factory, getting you a sample, and then walking you through a whole production run. So it's an end-to-end solution, and then we partner up with Freightos to help you import those products. I mean, it's a really smooth process. And so now you can really bring your product to life, or cut your manufacturing costs, or extend your product line faster than ever. And this isn't necessarily just for e-commerce stores. It's for retailers that are trying to private label their product. I mean, we look at the retail industry right now. A lot of these retailers are buying from brands. They're buying at wholesale prices. We've had retailers increase their margin by 30 to 50% going factory direct and creating their own private label brands through Sourcify. So it's an amazing experience. It's all streamlined through our software. And we're always happy to help companies bring products to life. Or even if you have manufacturing questions, feel free to hit us up. It's just an incredible dynamic to help people. And I think everyone that's produced overseas knows that it's not an easy process. There are struggles, and we're here for you. That's really why I started Sourcify.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing that I've loved, I mean, as a marketing guy, right, that I came across, and I love that you guys did, the Chrome extension, right? Your Chrome extension for tell us a little bit about it, how it can help people?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we were realizing, we were getting a lot of users who had tried Alibaba. They tried sourcing through Alibaba and just that open marketplace, and they were falling victim to fraud. The experience was horrible. And so we created this Chrome extension. You can just go on our website, trysourcify.com, It's right on the home page. It says get free Chrome extension. It's a free Chrome extension. You put it on your Google Chrome browser, and you can actually analyze factories in real time, where we give you a rating. What we do is we basically analyze every single data point on that factory online, cross-reference it with our own internal database and our sourcing team, and give it a ranking in real time, so you can see if this factory is actually legit and actually someone you want to work with. And then you can even start going through the process with Sourcify. So it's a really neat tool, and for us, it's about providing value to you. So it's completely free. Go ahead, give it a look. It's really something that we built out for fun, and it's been people have been using it, and the feedback has been great.
That's awesome. All right, well, Nathan, this has been an incredibly condensed summary of sourcing, and I think a fantastic crash course. So yeah, thank you so much again for coming to Masters of Trade. For everybody that's watching, we'll be putting up blog posts based off of this, sharing a couple of tools. Head to sourcify.com if only if you want to save 50%. Right, improve your margins by 50%. If you're not interested, then I guess forget about it. And tune into the next Masters Trades episode. It'll be at freightos.com/masters. Nathan, thank you so much again for attending. We appreciate it.
Thank you.